Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the curse of knowledge, which is a cognitive bias where basically you aren't aware of how smart you are relative to other people in a given topic. And so you tend to overestimate the abilities of other people at interpreting evidence or understanding what you're saying, or knowing what certain jargonous terms mean.
This happens a lot in the academic realm.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah, this is
teachers, and I'm sure everyone here can think of a teacher that would explain things and it would go right over their head.
Yeah.
And they would be like, what? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Academics is probably like where this is
interacting with academic people online too, like
yeah, exactly. Or I mean, even anything like doctors, registered dietitians, PhDs. I'm sure this is really bad if you're dealing with someone in like really nuanced fields like biostatistics, for example. They might throw out common words and it's like, well, what is that? Like, can you imagine, or many of you listening might be at least familiar with research. You talk to someone and you start talking about a p-value or a confidence interval. Most people are like, wait, what does that mean? And then you have completely other like terms that aren't even used in mainstream like scientific reporting, like S values. And they're like, is that even a thing? It's like, well, yeah, actually, it's a really new, novel way to show how compatible data is from a given study with your hypothesis. But like, people just don't know, like, just because someone's familiar with the field doesn't mean they're going to be super knowledgeable as someone who's like deep dived into all this stuff.
Yeah, and I think that it's really easy to I think intelligent people often discount their own intelligence too. So they think they're dumb and they think that everyone that they're talking to is like kind of dumb and on their same level, right?
Yeah.
But they're actually really intellectual.
Yeah.
And most people do not even have the IQ to hang with them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's that saying. What is that saying that is like explaining things, complex topics, is how you tell. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. But
okay, well, yeah.
Anyways, it's the mark of intelligence to explain complex topics
simply.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes certain things.
And I don't think that's simple. Yeah, I definitely don't think that's the mark of intelligence. I think that's a mark of proper communication.
Yeah, this is where it's really good to solicit feedback, and it's something like, for example, I help teach courses at the University of Western States in nutrition, right? And so these are master's level students that come in, and when they respond to essay questions, it's a very common theme for me to ask them, like, how would you explain this to a patient? Because like I get it, sure, but what they're saying, it's like there's nothing actionable in what you're saying. You're using a lot of jargon here. Dumb it down.
I see that with a lot of like online people too, influencers. Yeah. They want to be part of that social group of the scientists, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't know how to communicate to the public at all.
Yeah.
And so I'll point that out constantly because, I mean, a lot of my posts make me look like very simple, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah,
right?
Because
I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. You take complex topics about like behavioral psychology and turn it into something that people can implement
actionable,
right there. You spoon feed them. That's another term I like using, is spoon feed, the reader. And that means like, don't leave anything up to chance. Don't assume that they know something. Like, spoon feed it, no matter how stupidly simple you think it is or how obvious you think it is, say it anyway. And this is a great task for people who constantly write. It's like, it doesn't mean you need to ditch all the sciencey stuff. It's just,
I tend to like interweave it into my writing.
Interweave it. Like, I don't know, like here's a really bad example I just thought of, right? Like, think of mitochondria and energy production. You could be like, mitochondria, like the power plants of your cell that produces energy, cellular energy that every cell needs to use, something called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It's like you can interweave those complex terms with a really simple explanation of what it is, like cellular energy, adenosine triphosphate. basically the same thing, especially if you're consistent with the way you use it in whatever context you're using it, right?
Yeah, the curse of knowledge is often tied to the egocentric bias where you see things only through your lens too. So another way to overcome this is to perspective shift.
Yeah. Like,
right?
Yeah.
And that is a learned trait for most people. We have it like naturally.
Well, it's common in writing, right? If anyone listening does writing, and one of the first questions you ask is, who's your audience? Like, who are you trying to target with your writing? That's perspective shifting, because you want your writing to be palatable to them.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it's the same thing. The curse of knowledge, it's worst with people who spend exorbitant amount of times
with other academics.
In their own perspective. So imagine you're like a physics researcher, right? And I'm gonna pick on physics because that stuff goes over my head. So you're like a physics researcher, like doing all this research on quantum physics. You're constantly in communication with other physics researchers, discovering particles, doing all this cool stuff. And then suddenly you have to like go to class at a university and teach like physics 101. And you're just like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that question. What do you mean by simple? And well, I mean, can you like, anyway, but that's the thing is, if you spend a lot of time in your very narrow like field of research or whatever you're dug into, it's going to be harder for you to be able to perspective shift, because you've developed such a strong habit.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah, such a strong habit of communicating in a way that your peers can understand. Because I mean,
well, and plus, our ego, that's why I said it's tied to the egocentric bias, because we want to be accepted by our peers. That's why I see a lot of people online writing in ways that I'm like, what do you want? Like, what is your goal? Because most people online want to build a business.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're not going to build a business from getting your circle jerk, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So the way to overcome this one is kind of everything that we just said. It's pretty simple. Pause, think about who you're talking to and try and think about how much knowledge they would have on this given topic.
Most readers have about a 5th grade level reading. I know that sounds horrible, but that's what's been shown.
Yeah.
So you need to dumb it down a little.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, just think about talking to a teenager, like a 16-year-old. That's above this average reading level, but I think, if
with complex science topics, you have to shoot a little higher, I think.
Yeah. There's only so much dumbing down that you can do, really, right?
Yeah, you can't simplify it too much because then it loses its value, right?
Yeah. But just perspective shift. Keep that in mind. Be open to when people like ask you questions about a topic. Don't
get defensive. Like some people get defensive and like, you should know.
Yeah. They could be genuine, and take that as feedback, as maybe you could find a better way to communicate that information, and that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. Yeah. And maybe now you'll have an even better way to communicate in the future. So that's the curse of knowledge bias. And if you like this video, awesome. That's what we're trying to do. Please share it with somebody who you think might also like it. Give the video a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.